Thank you, Devonne Liggins from Tobago for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on to hear a little bit about your story, the migration part of your story. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about where you're from and what brought you to the US.
I am from the twin island nation of Trinidad and Tobago, but I am specifically from Tobago. And I know many people have not met anyone from Tobago, which is likely because there are only about 60 to 65,000 people on it. Tobago is called the capital of paradise, rightfully so. Quite small, right? But it is rich with culture and history. And during the transatlantic slave trade in colonial times, it was really responsible for a sizable proportion of Britain's wealth. In fact, in the late 1700s, people in England would say, "You're rich like a Tobago planter." Yeah, a lot of the sugar came from Tobago. And I think it's probably because it was smaller than many of the other islands. At the time, Trinidad was being colonialized by the Spanish. You know, Jamaica would have been sending a lot too, but because of its size, Britain just could not manage or administrate as easily as they could in Tobago. And the funny thing is, Tobago changed hands more times than any other Caribbean island. You know, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, they were fighting over Tobago because it was ideal. It was just the right size and, you know, easy to administrate. So they were able to get a lot out of her. But as with many things, when the when the transatlantic slave trade and slavery ended, they did not know how to make her profitable without forced labor. And so, you know, magical place to grow up, though. Magical place to come of age. You get the opportunity to get involved in a lot of things, you know, than probably if you lived in a larger country. But yes, Tobago, that's where I'm from.
You said something that I believe is important. You said that it's a magical place to have grown up in. Can you tell us a little bit about that magic?
Well, you know, I think probably for the same reasons Britain really enjoyed Tobago, that its size meant that, of course, everybody knew everybody. So growing up, there was an element of safety. There was an element of being able to make mistakes as a kid and as in your youth without, you were never really outside of parental control, but still able to kind of make the mistakes, walk down the street and, you know, I'm going to tell your mother I see you, you know, that kind of way. So people would look out for you, especially in the 80s and the 90s when I really came of age. There was just no other place more magical than Tobago for me, you know. I mean, of course, that's very subjective. That's my experience. But I absolutely loved it. And one thing about Tobago and Tobagonians, which again, very much similar to Jamaicans, is that nobody has one job, right? People, you know, the lawyer is the calypsonian, is the you know, everybody kind of does so much more than just what they are. And I think for me, it was just fantastic seeing that, because I would describe myself as a multi-hyphenate person. And I know it directly comes from the fact that I was raised in Tobago and seen almost everybody I knew do this, you know, and that's just the kind of place it is. Because when you only have 60,000 people, everybody has to pull their hand, as you say, you know, to do the different things to get everything done.
Tell us about your migration story. What took you from Tobago?
Well, in complete honesty, and a trigger warning for viewers, a suicide is actually what prompted our migration. What happened is, while my brother was about 1 year old and he was with his caregiver, a man came to our home and he asked for my father. And instead of waiting outside, he told the caregiver I would wait inside. And the caregiver thought that was a bit weird, because he'd come to the house before, but he never said he'd want to come inside. And he literally lit himself a fire right there in the living room. And it was just, I mean, she was shocked. She had to literally grab my brother, try to escape. Thankfully, she was able to out him, but I mean, he had died. And I mean, of course, growing up on a small island, you could imagine that this information was like, it spread like wildfire, forgive me for the pun. And my mother couldn't take it. Of course, there were so many allegations leveled against, our family. Like we owed him money, and like there was a whole lot of things, and obia and all the different things. But obviously, there was nothing like that involved. This man may have been suffering from some mental health issues, and just chose our house to be that place. So this was in 1986. My mother had an older sister who had migrated to New York, during the 70s, where they were asking for nurses, and she had migrated. And so my mother was like, okay, we want to leave. We're, put in for us to leave. We're ready to migrate. But as luck would have it, of course, this took 10 years before we were able to even get there. So in that 10-year time, her 1-year-old and her 4-year-old were now 14 and 11. And my mother had an amazing career as a lawyer, as an attorney, a thriving practice. And my dad had become a successful commercial fisherman. So, it was kind of like, what do we do? So we actually weren't able to physically move until about 1999, because our lives had been going on all along, right? So in 96, it came through, it being the green card, our green cards. And in 99, we finally were able to move. At that time, I was ready to go off to college. My brother was, just starting his high school career. My mother had run for politics, and, she'd become the first female independent in Tobago. She was the first female political leader in Trinidad and Tobago. So she had really achieved in that time. And so by the time we really were ready, we weren't really, really ready, but, when America calls, you answer.
It's so interesting to hear you share. I think a lot of people don't understand how long that process can be, from the application to the actual move. 10, 15 years can pass, and you're basically in limbo or waiting for something to happen. And I think it has certainly gotten even longer since 9/11, and become more complicated for individuals who are trying to transition. I do want to kind of go back to something that you shared. For anyone, the story that you shared, people really sometimes are in pain, and they do things that they would not do if they were not in pain. And you can get treatment if you're not doing well, if you're feeling depressed, and if you're thinking about moving in the direction of taking your own life. There are several hotlines that are available. I looked up one very quickly for Trinidad and Tobago. The hotline is 868-645-2800. There's certainly a national suicide hotline in the United States. It's 1-800-273-8255. And I know where I am from, there's also a hotline available there as well. And so these are things that you can look into. And most of the time, these hotlines are staffed 24/7. So there's always somebody available to talk to you. And many people have sought treatment. They feel better, and they are glad to be moving in that direction where they have their life back again and they're thriving. So thank you for sharing that story. Treatment is possible. Now, so you are in the States, and then you transition to university.
I personally really wanted to go to Boston University. Ask me why, I have no idea. I just like the idea of going to school in Boston. My mother really wanted me to go to Howard, because that was the path of many Caribbean students at that time in the 90s, was to go to this HBCU where you'd be with other Tobagonians and other people who have been there, and really not to strike out into any school that's, you've never heard of or never been to. And ironically, to solve the never been to part, Clifford Thornton of Wesleyan University, he's in the admissions of Wesleyan University, calls my mother and is like, hey, we'd love Devonne to come up and visit during something we call pre-fresh weekend. And during pre-fresh weekend, this is what happens. And I'm going to pick her up in New York, and I'm going to drive to Connecticut. And he explains all of this to her. So we're like, okay, but we'd never heard of such a thing before. So we're like, eh. So I fly there. I even though we had gotten the green card, I still happened to be in Tobago at the time. So he flew me from Tobago up to New York. He came to pick me up. And to tell you the truth, I did not like it at all. I thought it was cold. So Wesleyan University is, even though a US school, it's still kind of unique and different from the perspective of the students are very vocal. And it's, number one for civil kind of action taking. And because the students are so vocal, one of the things that you meet up with when you go for pre-fresh weekend is a lot of profanity written on the sidewalks, drawings of human body parts, kind of thing. And so I was so shocked by this coming from my Tobago upbringing, which is, mostly Black, mostly Christian, mostly very cookie cutter kind of lifestyle. And so it was so shocking to me. And I told my mom, I was like, I'm definitely not going here. My reason for coming back was that Wesleyan gave me the most money. So my mom was like, well, you're going whether or not like, either that or Howard. And I was like, oh. So, I chose Wesleyan. And I think it was one of the most, I hate to use the word magical again, but for me, really eye-opening, coming of age, mind-bending opportunities for me, living on my own, living with people of different races. It was so new, and all the information was almost like a child opening their eyes. It was like so much information, so many people, and I really think I came into my own as a person and got to really know me at Wesleyan. So it was, for me, it was fantastic.
So you were at Wesleyan, and then after that you went back home to Tobago. Many people stay in the States, but you decided to return to your home island. How did you make that decision?
Well, I actually stayed in the States I ended to Wesleyan in 2004. I stayed in the US for another 3 years. I had, really great opportunities, really great work opportunities, worked for Hartford Insurance Company, Credit Suisse, some really top-notch firms. But something about the American rat race for me wore me down. I was like, I could be on the beach somewhere, like, is this life? Is this my life? Living for this Friday. That's, when every day could be Friday, kind of thing. And I just knew I wasn't living in my fullness, and even though I didn't know what that even was at the time. But I just knew I wasn't living in my fullness. And I really wanted to go into international relations. But in the Caribbean, in order to get to where you're going, you have to take all these little roundabout type of tracks. So I wanted to do this international relations program that they had, an amazing program that they have at the University of West Indies. But my friend who had taken it, she said to me, that degree is no good without a law degree. She said the one thing I wish I had done was gotten a law degree before and then do it. So she's like, go and get the law degree. The only reason I'm an attorney for today is not because my mother said you should really become an attorney. I have this law firm that I want you to take. None of that. This girl said this, in order to become this to get the international relations degree, you need to be an attorney. So I went ahead and became the attorney and completely forgot all about the international relations degree and just kind of pursued law, which, and I always tell people this, I actually failed my first year because I thought I could just, walk in there and just do an exam and it would be fine, and it don't go so. It don't go so, right? You have to actually do the work, apply yourself, and do all that. So I actually flunked that first year. Then I came back focused and ready, and I put my all into it. And that on my second try at it was really, really good. Made some very high scores. Like really did really well. I ended up graduating with my law degree, being admitted to the bar of Trinidad and Tobago. I've been admitted about 7 years now.
What a wonderful story, and a really nice piece of encouragement for people who are reacclimatizing or going back to school, that maybe it's not easy the first time around, but you can really, try to focus and endeavor to do better the next time. And we see that in your story.
So I have Irish twins. One is born on January 16th of one year, and the other is born on July 16th of the following year. So exactly 1.5 years apart. So the first child was about 2 years old when he aspirated on a cashew nut. Yes. And this happened in Tobago. It got lodged in his throat. He coughed it out, but then he just kind of had a sound that, that seemed to just kind of be going on. So probably for about a week, a long time, for about a week, we were trying to figure out like what was this sound. We carry him to different pediatricians in Tobago, and some of them were like, oh, we'll just maybe give him some antibiotics or some kind of but nobody could really do anything because we on Tobago, many of the decisions about what kind of medical services you get are based on the number of people to justify the thing. And later on, we would learn that he needed a specific type of bronchoscope that would be specific for children of his age. Now, you could get bronchoscopes, but they have to be specific and flexible enough for a child of that age. And they just don't have it. We took him to Trinidad. He was there for a while. They have one, but it was broken. So it was just really heart-tugging because, we literally had to live in the hospital in Trinidad, which for somebody who's coming from Tobago to Trinidad is very expensive. My husband literally had to stop working to be in the hospital with him because I had a baby. He was still kind of nursing, just kind of coming out of nursing to see about our other son. So it was a really rough time. My mom had to kind of stop practicing for a little bit to make all of this happen. Finally, we decided, you know what? We cannot have him in this limbo until this alleged tool is being fixed. So we literally kind of just took him out of the hospital and straight onto a flight and got to the US. And the thing was out within 48 hours. Like, I know it was so traumatic for our family. It was so traumatic because he was suffering. He was, and imagine a 2-year-old, and this is, bright, gregarious, just, lovely, light, just kind of so solemn, and so we took him and the thing was out, and the doctor who did eventually take it out, and we're grateful for him every day. He told me that the thing was so large. He's like, he think the cashew nut probably alerted us to something else that was in there. Because he said he'd never taken something out so large from a human, adult or child. He said it's definitely going in the history books. He's like, he thought at one point he would have to cut open his chest in order to get it out. But thankfully, he's like, he was able to pull it out. Now, yes, that was done. But the problem was that we within maybe a month, he started making the noise again. So we were like, oh my God, like maybe it's something that keeps coming back. The doctors were trying to tell us maybe you want to stay in the US to do ongoing treatment. Like it was such a time of uncertainty for our family because we just didn't know what to do. So we made the decision to kind of probably make our way back to the US. I always felt like, maybe there was something like, and you don't want to compare children, right? You don't want to say, just like, he's not like the first one, kind of thing. So in Tobago, we'd always say, that one, he don't talk to nobody. He would ignore you as though in his own world. He would line up cars, color coordinated, size coordinated, and very fixated on very specific shows. There's really no testing, in Tobago in any kind of definitive diagnostic way. We had this suspicion of autism. So we decided to bring him here, and literally within 7 days, he got his diagnosis that yes, he is autistic, a verbal autistic, but, just to get the diagnosis so that we could move and get him the services and the kind of treatment that would help him cope.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I think this is not an uncommon story. Many parents, especially if you are not versed in developmental issues, may wonder if this is just the personality of my child. And you were fortunate to have somebody within your network who was able to prompt you. Otherwise, it could have been missed for a long period of time. So the next time we're together, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, about your understanding of the diagnosis, your experience of it. I know it is something that when it happens, parents grapple with all kinds of feelings, the feelings that you had, and kind of how you're moving forward. Thank you for sharing.
Hey family, if you're finding value in our content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us reach more Caribbean immigrants who need guidance, encouragement, and a safe space to talk about mental health. Let's build this community together because our well-being matters. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. One love.